time to get together and discuss the ordeal of gang stalking. And as usual, there's no shortage of material when it comes to group harassment. It involves everything that people normally gravitate to, and you know I've talked about that before. I'm a little surprised that more people are not interested in gang stalking. Okay, you have all the elements that people like. It's mysterious. It's definitely freaky. It's definitely illegal. It involves murder, violence. It would be like a thriller movie mixed with horror and mystery all in one. I think that a lot of people, they get the wrong idea when they look into this or they hear about it, or they may see, someone break down gang stalking and call it a delusion or a crazy conspiracy theory. Or they might watch a channel where you have people who, are maybe just new at this. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. Or they discredit the whole thing. And then, in fact, there's a lot of targeted individuals. And of course, that's the nomenclature of this whole thing. Welcome to the live stream, Dublin. Which I'm borrowing. And you can call it whatever. As long as we know what we're talking about, as long as we're all on the same page, to me, it doesn't matter. And, a lot of targets will say, well, I don't even want to call myself a targeted individual anymore. There's too many shills out there, which there are. And you begin to wonder, some of these people that call themselves targeted individuals are making videos. Are they just trying to make us all look nuts? But of course, I don't think so. I think some of them maybe, there's obviously a percentage of them are doing that. Okay, I'm not going to deny that. But I think a lot of people are confused and they don't know how to break this stuff down, and they're just trying to, deal with it. And they're dealing with it the same way that I am, and that is, I'm trying to connect with other people who've experienced gang stalking. And not only am I trying to, I don't know, find other people who can understand what I'm dealing with, but I want to help other people to deal with this whole ordeal of gang stalking, because I remember when this whole thing started for me, it was just horrific. I had no idea what was going on. There wasn't a targeted individual community. There wasn't anybody to talk to. It was just an all-out hunt down, and it was brutal. I'm surprised I'm still alive. Literally, I'm not exaggerating that either. And I know a lot of targets out there are wondering what they're in for. They're wondering how to process all these things that are happening to them, and a lot of them are, doing the calendar thing. They are counting the days. They are looking at the clock. And they're wondering, is this going to keep going? Is this ever going to end? How long are these people going to do this to me? What do they want? That's the kind of stuff that was going through my mind. I figured they'd, get their pound of flesh and go. And it just kept getting more unreasonable and intense, ridiculously unreasonable. I know there's a lot of people out there that can relate with me, because that's the experience that I hear from most of the people that I talk to. It just escalates. It gets worse, and it becomes more unreasonable. The people seem to appear not only more aggressive and tactical, but illogical. And it's just the only thing that you can figure is that you're being experimented on. that it's just some type of sick form of entertainment, or that you're some type of sacrifice or something, or that you're being used for coercion. And sometimes all those things can be true, and we're going to look into some of that as we usually do. What are some of the possible motivations, some of the different aspects of this nightmare of gang stalking that you're in? You have the government stuff, you have the occult, you've got witchcraft, you've got the secret societies, you've got coercion, you've got people that are just, I don't know, blessed to have too much time on their hands and they want to play God with you. I mean, it's all combined together, and I know you guys can relate with me. And I got my reading glasses, and I don't know where they are. What? How? I remembered to get them this time, and now, okay, it was hiding from me in plain sight. I actually remember tonight. I'm going to go into the comments, and I'm going to see who's out there. HD. All right. Too many shells indeed. Sometimes they sound older when they are younger too. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Beach Walker, right on. Wow, that was usually you come in at the last 5 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. You made it last time. Just me, Heidi. Okay. HD Alex Jones. Okay. Is Bill yeah. Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson are going to light everybody's heads on fire. I like watching those guys, but I can't help wondering if there's an agenda involved in some of that stuff. But you know what? I'm not going to go into that because that's, for me, that's going to be off topic, and I just don't have all the information. You got to be careful when you start jumping to conclusions, especially when someone else's reputation is on the line. As far as I know, Alex has made some mistakes, but as far as I know, I don't know, he's trying to expose some dark things, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Not to mention that I usually do my Alex Jones impression of the Bilderbergers and the deep state military industrial complex. So yeah, I like uh, I like doing that, and I don't want to ruin it. So um, looks like we got a dialogue out there. Burger Boy, really? Are we gonna are we gonna play this game tonight? uh, I'm just gonna leave you in there for now. Just to see what happens. It's gonna be fun. Okay, they always travel in packs, so we'll see what's going on here. Um, yeah, okay. He did an Alex Jones impression too, huh? Okay, yeah. Right on. Well, anyway, getting back to what I was talking about. Um, you are part of a menagerie. You are part of uh, of a scheme, of a landscape that is out there for people. Okay, and it's not, I mean, it's not that you can nail this down to one thing, because there are many things being accomplished with gang stalking. Okay, with group harassment, with experiments like MK Ultra, with government programs, with different agendas that involve ideologies. So it kind of connects together, and all these things eventually connect. And I've talked about that before. Whether you're looking into the origins of the hierarchy that is ruling the world right now, whether you're going into the puppets and looking at some of that stuff, whether you're looking at the governments, um, all those things are connected. You get into the council of three, or actually you get into the 13 families at the top of the list: the Astery, the Bundy, the Collin. In fact, I was looking into that. I guess they basically brought witchcraft over to America, according to some people. The Collins, and then there's some other things that go into the St. Clair. A lot of people believe that the Bilderbergers, uh, that they, or excuse me, not the Bilderberg, but the Rothschilds are at the top of that. Some people would dispute that. Some people would say it's the St. Clair, but evidently you have some connections with the occult. Then you got the DuPont, Freeman, Kennedy, the Lee, the Onassis, Rockefeller, Russell, Van Dyke. You got the I always have a hard time pronouncing that one. And Merovingian. That's what it is. I always forget that. And then there's that battle between either the Rothschilds or the St. Clairs. You go down into the Council of 33, High Freemasonry. And of course, they had their first lodge in 1717. And, the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons are connected. And rather than to go back to 1313 for the first Rosicrucian, you could actually go back to about 1500 before the Common Era. And you had the Egyptians talking about that stuff. And I've gone into that when you get into the all-seeing eye, or you get into, the symbology involved and the secret societies. You just look at your dollar bill. You got the pyramid, you got the eye, the all-seeing eye, and a lot of people would break that down differently. When you get into Satanism, it's different, and of course, all these things are connected. In fact, I was listening to someone talk about the Illuminati, and when you get past the High Freemasonry, you get into the Council, or not the Council, the Committee of 300. And then you move down into the Rosicrucians, and then you get to the Illuminati, and then the low level, basically the foundations of Freemasonry, where a lot of those guys, and I hear people talking about the Freemasons. There was a guy, I think, up in Canada that went and burned some lodges down or something like that. And I can see where he's coming from. I know that there's a lot of things that are not conducive with Christianity involved in Freemasonry. And but I think the low level guys, they don't really know what the hell's going on, you know. And it's unfortunate that guys could be doing some time. I actually thought about getting some type of fund set up or something like that, but I looked into it. It's pretty touchy, and I don't know if we should become involved. I feel bad for him. Um, you know, a lot of targets get pushed into things that are just not a solution. And you have to understand how these things work. And when people are talking about the Freemasons, so yes, there are things involved in that, but most of those guys, they're just businessmen. They just want connections. They want deals with loans and mortgages, and a lot of people do it for social reasons. And they should know better. Okay, and they are putting themselves in a place where they could be influenced spiritually. So I'm not saying that some of the low level guys aren't involved in some demonic stuff, or that they're not taken over and used, maybe even in gang stalking or other things. But for the most part, they don't know what the hell is going on. And when targets go into these things, when they're looking at the Illuminati, or they're looking at uh, you know the hierarchy of puppets, or even the bloodlines that go all the way back to Egypt, or even before that, technically, when you get into the Genesis 6 account, most of these guys don't know anything about that. And there's a lot of puppetry going on, a huge amount of money being thrown around, ridiculous, uncalculable amount of money. I mean, ridiculous. You'd have to come up with a new number when you get into the 13 families and the hierarchy of this stuff. The Committee of 300. A lot of those guys aren't pure bloods; they're half breeds, but they've got a lot of money. Um, Interesting. And then, of course, where does the target individual fit in that menagerie? Well, like I said, the target is there for a lot of different reasons. And when you look at all those things, you cannot separate the occult, witchcraft, the secret societies, the demonic stuff, and all these things that people talk about. I mean, once you get into one aspect of this conspiracy theory, you've got to look at everything and you have to connect the dots properly. Okay. A lot of people will focus just on witchcraft or whatever, but it's different. There's more than that. Okay. And the guy that I was listening to, he was, giving his testimony on, actually, I think he was from the Collin family or something like that. There's a lot of dispute around whether it's, a credible testimony, but evidently there's the witchcraft. There's all kinds of geographical hierarchies to where people are in control of different areas. You get these, mothers of darkness and all these things that are involved in the occult. A lot of people talk about witchcraft. A lot of people are dealing with those things. It's a little more prevalent when you get over into the third world countries, which comes into my next point, because when you get down into Haiti or you get down into other areas, a lot of Christian missionaries will talk about, doing a lot of exorcisms or whatever in those areas. And it's just, it's some type of, it really, it plays into what we're going to get into. That's why I brought it up, because there in those areas, that type of spiritual activity is not being obfuscated at the same level. Okay. And, there's not a whole lot of churches or people doing exorcisms either. Usually when you get into the third world countries or people that are, where that stuff is on display, it's like fighting fire with fire. They'll go to one witch doctor, it's like they play these little games. In fact, some of the people involved in that type of witchcraft or Santeria or all those different things, they will play that game with people, and then of course they might even, I guess, according to this other gentleman I was listening to, they will put spells on these people, the customers that they have, and they will put them into a type of spiral where they can't get away. Okay, in other words, uh, they'll be repeat customers because there's always something that the witch doctor or the witch or the medicine man or whatever has to help them with, right? And they'll kind of play that way, but it's a lot more prevalent. And when you get into the West, yeah, it's more obfuscated, which I think is a lot of the stuff when you get into coercion and you get into the obfuscation of the spiritual dimension. Uh, you have that. You have the psychiatric criteria, but of course, people are not. They're not oppressed by demons, or the people that are claiming to be targeted individuals. They couldn't be dealing with real witchcraft or the occult or secret societies or anything demonic. Of course, they're just having a persecutory delusion. They're just whacked out. They're schizophrenic. They're having symptoms. There's no demons. You know, and even in the targeted individual community, you will have a lot of resistance to that. And you can believe whatever you want, and I've talked about that before. After this whole thing's over, we'll see who's right. I'm getting out of that. But you are part of that menagerie. Okay. And due to the fact that you have that type of agenda going on, and it's not just to obfuscate the spiritual reality of affliction, oppression, in our world, and the involvement of the spiritual dimension and manipulating people using targeted individuals, for coercion, to silence whistleblowers, or even when you get into the government aspect of it, when you get into, a lot of people talk about the Stasi police state, and the other things that are going on in the political arena. We're headed towards, communism, the infiltration of the Fabian socialists, back in the 60s. Actually, it was before that. And the introduction of Marxist theology and, separating people, dividing and conquering, and using minorities to overrepresent people and to create a type of society that is morally broken down. The patriarchal family is gone, and you create a society that is dependent upon the government. And then, of course, you got to turn citizens against each other, right? And that's when you get into utilizing the scapegoat or a targeted individual, or using them for coercion, silencing whistleblowers. You could even look at a lot of the stuff that's going on, in the financial realm as a money grab. Okay, you get into things after the Patriot Act, and you have citizens being surveilled and investigated with no real clear cut reason why this stuff is going on. And then what happens? Well, it just leads to more investigating. It's a reciprocal scenario that furthers that type of agenda and infiltration into society. Desensitizing people to that stuff, creating a type of police state. Demonizing the population so that laws can be passed and so on and so forth, and then just making money on the whole thing too. Because you guys remember all about I'm almost afraid to say it, but we'll just say that there were certain factions of the government selling cocaine and everything else under the sun. Even in the area that I'm living in, you talk about the involvement and some of the biker gangs and stuff like that, and I've heard that from people before that some of them are getting drugs from sources they shouldn't be getting them from. Okay, a lot of weird stuff. So there's a lot of different areas, and you're part of a menagerie. You are part of this equation, and it goes into a lot of things. When you get into even the proliferation of drugs, along with that invasion of Marxist theology, and we've talked about people that are traumatized, and some of the experiments done in MK Ultra. Okay, where people are taken into a place where they are traumatized. Of course, that's fundamental for targeted individuals to deal with trauma. It's the invasion into their mind, all this stalking, all this harassment. It's basically the same thing, along with the covert drugging and everything. It's more of I don't know, a different type of controlled environment, because the targeted individual, of course, is you're roaming around. If you want to call yourself a free moral agent of society, how long you're going to remain that way is questionable, depending on what you're subjected to. And unfortunately, a lot of targets, I've talked about that, we don't even know who they are, because they've probably been locked up, or maybe committed suicide or something like that. But there is that type of agenda, and the targets are experimented on. They're used for lateral comparisons in society to create another type of menagerie that goes into philosophy, right? Which also feeds into that psychiatric type of, I don't know, indoctrination that has invaded medicine, which goes into a further agenda. Because, when you look at it now, your physician, I think they made a rule, oh gosh, I can't remember what it is now, to where if your doctor, there's certain things that they have to do that they never had to do these things before, and I should have written it down, but they can lose their license and everything, man. So now the new hitman, eventually that you're going to be dealing with is your own physician. Not to mention the fact that you've got to fill out little questionnaires when you go to the doctor of, how do you feel safe in your house? Are you depressed? Have you been sleeping? How many boxes of Lucky Charms have you been eating? Whatever. And it's like a miniature MMPI test. You're seeing that diagnostic criteria becoming more prevalent, and people are being desensitized to these things. Target individuals are part of that whole menagerie. The mass shootings, all these things that are going on, the proliferation of drugs. Now people are overdosing on fentanyl. Where the hell did all that come from anyway? Right, it's all part of it. Tear it down better, right? And eventually, even when you get into what they're talking about with Agenda 2030, you can look back at Agenda 21 and look at regionalization and all these things going on. And it's a hybrid model that goes into what I've talked about before, when you get into giving the elite that delusion. sucking the money out of some of these guys who are lifted up as sages in our society now, who are nothing more than people who are involved in basically just businessmen who are making a lot of money, and now they're gurus who are involved in our health system and everything. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. But you can see that going on, and it's a delusion that goes all the way back into that hidden knowledge and secret wisdom that goes straight back to the beginning of this whole thing. Which, like I said before, if you're going to tie it together, you look at your dollar bill, and you got that pyramid on there with that all-seeing eye, and the New World Order and everything. It's all there, and they're selling it. They're selling it to everybody, and they're obfuscating it because I've talked about this before. When people talk about creating a utopia, we're doing all these things, or we're developing, extracellular matrix for organ regeneration, or helping out veterans who get their arms blown off or whatever. And we're looking at all these things, or increasing the mitochondrial layer to extend the lifespan of human beings. But really, it's not going to come your way. And a lot of that stuff's been out for a long time, and they still haven't done anything with it. I remember reading about that stuff in the '90s. In other words, if in order for them to have a utopia, they've got to have control over you, and they've got to have slaves. Otherwise, it's not a utopia. And don't fool yourself. A very small percentage of the population have the money and control over everything. Okay. And targeted individuals are part of that menagerie. I'm going to look at the comments and see what's going on. Okay. Wow. I missed a lot of stuff here. Okay. All right. Okay. HD says spiritual and technological warfare. Yeah. Everything is involved in this. And, the menagerie of the targeted individual. There's a lot of facets. There's a lot of areas of interest for targets, whether they're dealing with technology or they're dealing with something from the spiritual dimension, which, of course, I've talked about that before, can also be technological. Okay. HD says, I don't think gang stalkers are human sometimes. So, you know what? I depends on what you mean by that. It really does. And like I said before, you get people that are very, I don't know, very resistant to the spiritual application to gang stalking. In fact, I saw another guy making a video not too long ago, and it was kind of funny actually. I'm not going to mention the guy's name, but he was looking into the definition of a demon, and these things are not mythological. Okay, and that's really when you get into the spiritual foundations of just who we are, whether you believe in gang stalking or not. I've heard a lot of people, breaking down the 70 weeks of Daniel, of course, and looking at the desolations that were determined, also the prophecies of Jeremiah and Isaiah. And you have, of course, the Jews going through the 5 successions of judgment and being scattered at 70 AD, and they're regathered. I mean, just like prophecy after 1948, everybody should at least acknowledge the fact that there's something going on. Okay. And then you have the resist. Oh, no, that's a Zionist conspiracy. You know what? God has used a lot of things to accomplish his purposes. And the fact that it was prophesied, not to mention when you go into the end of the Babylonian exile, which was in 536, the decree went out in 538. And of course, they had to liquidate businesses and they had to organize everything. They were there for 70 years, from 605 to 536. And they didn't get back until 536. It probably took them quite a while to take that 1,000-mile journey. But coincidentally enough, 7 times 360 converted into a solar calendar, 0.9857, which is 2520 times 0.9857 is 2484, exactly from 536. All you have to do is add those years in. It goes straight to 1940. Is that a coincidence? My gosh, man, are you serious? You couldn't make that kind of a thing up. I'm not going to go off on that. But there are definitely things to consider when people are dealing with, with this whole aspect of gang stalking, and probably not so much targets that are dealing with, more reasonable things. What I mean by that is it's not the higher level of harassment. There's a lot of targets that I've talked to. They might be dealing with some break-ins. They might be dealing with some workplace harassment or surveillance, but it's pretty much limited to that. They're not hearing voices or dealing with, V2K. Nobody's poisoning them. No, they're not experiencing food tampering. They seem to be able to get away from it when they leave their area. And, it usually waits a while before it starts up again. But coincidentally, usually deal with that 2-week period. But it's just not the same. They're not dealing with clairvoyant street theater. They're not having the deja vu. They're not having a lot of the stimuli that a lot of targets out there that are experiencing higher forms of harassment have to deal with. Okay. But it's still traumatic. I'm not downplaying it. But what I'm getting at is that for them, the idea of people being possessed by demons, well, it's not something that they really have to deal with. Okay. For a target that is dealing with something comparable to the soothsayer of Philippi, where Paul and Silas Paul actually cast the demon out of this prophetess in that area who was making a lot of money, and convinced everybody in that area that she was, some type of, concubine that could tell the future, which I've gone into that. And that's the same way, technically, that all these people are being deceived. And when you get into the elite concerning the hidden knowledge and secret wisdom, that type of illumination, okay, same thing, comes from the same place. And that's used, okay. But when targets deal with that, right, and a lot of them do, whether they believe people are reading their mind or something, well, I was just thinking that. How could you know it was, and there's a lot of illusions. There's a lot of ways these can happen. But how does that work? Okay. What about the, stuff that's involved in the Rosicrucians or the Freemasons? All of it's connected. And they have prophecies. Okay. And a lot of those things have happened. And I've talked about how that could be possible, and still have possibilities out there for individuals in a type of, if you want to call it open theistic, interpretation, where, the majority of the world is going to go with that plan that the principalities and powers have. They're going to go with that flow. And the outcome is going to basically still be the same, but on an individual basis. You can be saved out of their plan. This is when you get into astrology and all those things. That's how they do that stuff. Okay. A lot of these things are equations. Some of it's mathematic. And of course, there's other things involved, whether you're dealing with the divine council or you're dealing with a dimensional perspective outside of space-time or something like that, however you're going to look at that. But targets will deal with, how does it work? Well, that's really the only explanation. But of course, you have other people who swear that there's a supercomputer controlling everybody on the planet. Okay. And all they need is your DNA and they can read your mind and everything else. If you want to believe that, that's fine with me. But, if you get into the Pascalian wager, if you're wrong, it's not going to be good. If people deny the spiritual reality, what would it hurt people to believe that there's a God and there's a devil and these things are happening? If it's not true, well, what's going to happen? Well, you're just going to die and it won't matter. But if you live your life as if there's no God, you deny the whole thing and find out there is, that's going to be a problem, isn't it? You got to use the equation of zero effect. Use your head on that one. But targets deal with that. And there's a lot of resistance. Getting back to what HD said, yeah. Well, you're not necessarily dealing with something that's human all the time, depending on who you are. Like I said, not everybody deals with that. So that's a good point. Okay, let's see what's going on. All right, let's see here. All right. I'm just kind of sifting through. All right. Looks like you guys got a dialogue. I'm going to skip all the way up to the recent comments. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm not trying to repeat myself. And yeah, Pascal's wager, Sean Abrams. How you doing? Glad to see you in the live stream. It's really what it comes down to. Okay. Well, it looks like you guys have a dialogue out there. Nothing wrong with that. Right on. Hang out with us for a while. That's what we're doing. So the targeted menagerie involves all those things. You're promoting an agenda, like I talked about. It goes into the all the aspects that we're dealing with. You get into some really strange things that involve higher forms of harassment. We kind of just talked about that when you get into the spiritual dimension, and I talked a little bit about the hierarchy. People will dare go into the conspiracy theories of the Illuminati or whatever, but when it comes to the occult connection, which I've missed, I've referenced that before. Even when you get into UFOs or even New Age stuff or transcendental meditation or other forms of astral projection or other religions and stuff, then all of a sudden you got all these commonalities. You got all these things that are connected, whether it's UFOs or beings that seem to walk through walls or something, and that now you're connected with everything. You're talking about the occult. You're talking about false religions or different religious beliefs. You're dealing with the secret societies. All these things are connected. You're getting into witchcraft. You're looking at all that stuff, and that's when you get into some of the strange motives for gang stalkings. We already talked about the coercion. We talked about the obfuscation of the spiritual reality. We've talked about targets being part of that psychiatric scenario where mental illness is pushed. Of course, there's a financial motive with big pharma. There's a lot of things going on. The infiltration into your physician's office, who's going to be the new hitman for the new world order, you know. And that's we're moving towards that. I'm not saying you shouldn't trust your doctor. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying look at what's happening. Okay. And by the way, a disclaimer: I'm not a doctor. I just play one on YouTube. Um, but you have all those things. You have the ideologies that come into play, and of course, lateral comparisons, and you're part of that menagerie. But some of the weirder things that I've really I've experienced it, and I've talked about it with other targets before. And a lot of people will talk about the fact that when they get attacked, when they're dealing with street theater, when they're dealing with aggressive gang stalking, aggressive workplace harassment, that a lot of times these people are not just, I mean, because, we've talked about the illogical nature of individuals attacking you that way. Okay. Because, the claim for a lot of them is that it sucks to be you. And, we did, we can do this to you. You deserve it. It's justified, or whatever kind of gaslighting that's going along with this whole thing. Right. Um, but why would someone do that? Okay. Obviously they're miserable. Happy people don't do that kind of stuff, right? A lot of options out there, right? You could be doing anything with your time. You could be, flying a kite. You could be helping an old lady across the street. I mean, really? In other words, there's an obvious need because when you do the chain reaction of finding out the cause of something, there's always a cause and effect. There's a chain reaction with everything. When you see someone doing something, you know they're doing it for a reason, and there's a motive, and there's also something that they need. Okay, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. It's not like it's just I don't know what else to do with myself. I think I'm going to harass you. Okay. Aside from people that could be be dealing with something demonic where their life is literally in tyranny. They're making a conscious choice to do these things. And so you can see that there's an obvious motive, and that motive comes out of an obvious need. And it leads you into that chain reaction of looking at some of these things and also the behavior that surrounds gang stalking. Like I said, whether you're dealing with workplace harassment or whatever, whether you're dealing with a perp or a troll, what's your dog in the fight? What's your deal? Huh? What are you after? What do you want? You want something. What is it? And you can see by the behavior that they exhibit what they're getting out of it. Not only that, but one of the obvious motives is that they're venting on you, aren't they? Obviously, they are. They're treating you like shit. They're attacking you. They're causing trouble. They're bringing chaos into your world. They're venting on you. Okay, they obviously, like I said, they've got a lot of negative emotions. They've got a lot of things going on in their life that is driving them to be bitter, cruel, aggressive, gang stalkers, to be perps, right? And of course, what's the other strange phenomena surrounding these individuals? Okay, well, I've talked about this before, and a lot of people have mentioned this, is that, that would make me feel bad if I did that, right? That's the normal response of being aggressive and attacking someone to the point where you make them, depressed or scared or anxious, or, you ruin their day or whatever. I mean, it is a lot more intense than that because, of course, targets are very vulnerable because they're traumatized. And of course, the chain yanker comes along. Who knows what's going to happen? I've talked about the reckless nature of gang stalking in the sense that when you attack someone like that, when you hinder their life in that way and subject them to that kind of trauma and torture, when someone is molested in that way, what happens? Well, they become complacent. They become confused. They're sleep deprived. They become, very angry, agitated. Who knows what the hell's going to happen? They could get into an auto accident and kill a family of 5. Right now it's exponential, very reckless, very thoughtless. But what's the phenomena that you're going to see, that you all have seen, that you've all run into, that everybody that's a victim of gang stalking has witnessed, is that they get a little bounce in the step. Okay, so they're venting on you. They're being cruel. They're agitating you. They got to play this game with you, and then what? They get off on it, right? Or they get something else out of it. I've seen that. I've heard them make little comments, right? Not only is it the days that you're getting harassment from all different angles, you're dealing with that crescendo effect, a bunch of sharks that see blood in the water. Sometimes it's just that you're having a good day. Sometimes it's that you have some peace, right? They want to get that low hanging fruit. They don't have their own, and it speculatively you move into those strange areas of motivation for gang stalking when you deal with the psychic vampire, right? You're dealing with that type of feeding on the target, right? And all those different things. A lot of people will get into different energy vampires, or they'll, you get into different vibrations and frequencies and all that stuff. Or even when you get into some of the theories involved with, the demonic thing, right? Because you have a principle involved in that spiritual type of scenario where people are being devoured or destroyed. Right? There's a reason, right? Like I said, there's a chain reaction. Things don't just happen for nothing, right? There's got to be a way things work. There always is, right? It's like money making the world go around. You don't go to work and trade your life for a job stocking shelves or delivering food or whatever it is that you do because it's fun. You need the money. There's always a need behind the activity that you're witnessing. And gangstalking is no different. Some of the strange explanations that you get into involving the phenomena of gangstalking can involve those things. And we've already talked about witchcraft and the connection to that stuff. We've talked about the secret societies. And also I've mentioned this before as well, that people are being turned against each other. Right, the criteria that is used to condemn the targeted individual is a type of agreement. When you get into the occult, when you even the Freemasons, when you get into the secret societies, you get all these things. You're looking at different contracts. In fact, I was listening to someone who came out of witchcraft, and evidently they were indoctrinated at a very young age by a family member, and they were literally approached by beings, according to their own testimony, that wanted them to give themselves over to these spirits, right? Even as a young boy, this guy was dealing with this stuff. He was introduced to witchcraft, I think it was his grandma or something like that, and then eventually it got to a point where you get into that type of scenario where there's a type of contract, or even when you get into the rituals of witchcraft or whatever, bloodletting or even human sacrifice. These things involve a type of act or agreement that an individual will make. Some of those contracts you get into when people speculate as has someone sold their soul for fame or fortune, right? And you get into different actors that would suggest that that's what happened. And then all of a sudden, they rise to the top. They've got everything, and then they die, right? They're there for 10, 20 years. They've got it all. And then, boof, they're gone, man. The contract is over. Who knows? But you're dealing with that when you're dealing with gangstalking. You're dealing with that type of unwritten contract, in the sense that the criteria that is used for these people to harass you, and the gaslighting is always there. You deserve it. This is why, or whatever, whether it's something from your past, or whether they're trying to gaslight you, or whether they're just saying they believe a rumor about you, or whatever is going on in the scenario. They are attacking you, and they are using a type of manufactured justification, which we talked about in the last live stream, which inadvertently is a signed contract for them. And what is that for? For their future judgment and their future punishment. Because not only are they signing off on that, they are aggressively enacting that upon you as if they have the right to do it. What are they going to say when it comes time for them to experience the labyrinthian torture that they've used on targeted individuals, that they've taken part in, that they have signed off on with the activity of engaging in this act of gangstalking? You want to play? Okay, you're going to pay, right? There's no getting out of it. It's a fundamental reality. But once again, when you get into some of this stuff, it's really weird. And there's no denying, the involvement of some of that stuff. Even when you get into MK Ultra, you look at, some of the things that were done to people. And of course, all the commonalities are there, whether it's, the trance-like state that people are, involved in when you get into the occult or other religions, and what they did to people, hearing things over and over, using deprivation, using stimuli and drugs, and things to alter the state of consciousness of the victim, much like is done in the occult. And drugs are always used. All these things are there, and you can see the agenda. Well, I'm going to get into the comments again and see what we're looking at. Okay, let's see here. Ernie, how you doing? Okay. All righty. Well, you guys have a dialogue going there. Oh, you gotta love it. Okay. Well, you guys have a pretty good little conversation going here. Okay. I'm just scanning through here. Okay. Well, let's see what Mr. Beach Walker says here. How cold is it there where you are, Dr. D? Well, I'll tell you what, man. With the wind chill calculation, let me see. We got a little bit of wind out there. I'm thinking between 30 and 40 below wind chill, or a little bit more than that. But I would imagine you're looking at least 20 below without that right now. But I've got this place cranked. I've got the heat cranked. It's 80 in here. I'm sitting around, basically in my underwear, which, is that nice? You can just do a live stream. You can talk to, let me see here. I got 28 people. I'm just sitting here in my underwear. You got to love it. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is cold, Mr. Beachwalker. And in fact, I talked about that the other night. Is that, boy, targets are threatened in a lot of ways, and there's always that fear. At least for me, I've dealt with that, and I've actually had to live homeless in the winter before. It's scary. It's scary for targets. Not only are you dealing with workplace harassment, you're getting persecuted in your community. You're dealing with all these weird things that make your life hard. As far as keeping things. I mean, everything's expensive for targets. Either you got to move around, or you got to switch jobs, or you got to take a job where you don't get a whole lot of pay, or whatever. And then you get attacked in a certain way, and you never know what's going to happen. I've come pretty close to financial destitution. I had to finally take a loan out to pay off my credit cards. I fixed my credit score quite a bit. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it's really good now. But it happened, and then you have things like the pandemic, and then the gas prices go up, and then you get attacked, and you just don't know what the hell is going to happen. And homelessness is usually one of those things that's looming, one of those hammers that is hanging over the target individual's head. And with adverse weather, well, yeah. I mean, there's people that I know that I see them. I've talked about this before. That live homeless where I am. It's pretty extreme cold weather. It gets pretty hot in the summer, but you could survive that. But you get down into the desert. Of course, you want to freeze, or do you want to cook? There doesn't seem like there's anywhere in between. You can go up to Washington, or maybe Oregon, get up by the coast or something like that. I don't know. If I had enough money, I'd probably do something like that. But yeah, you deal with extreme weather. It's scary to think about that. There's people that die. They just had a bunch of stuff on the news. We had a lot of water mains break around here. But as far as people living homeless, yeah. In fact, I found where one guy was outside one of my properties. He had a bunch of beer cans, and he was literally lighting stuff on fire in them and covering himself up with a tarp. I didn't even know he was out there. And you can deal with all that. There's people that freeze to death. Dublin Fitzpatrick mentioned that it's cold. What about the homeless people? And what do you do? And target individuals, there's a lot of people that have talked about that. I know Josh Waz has just talked about his experiences as a target being homeless. It's pretty scary when you think about it. And I think he's from Michigan, so it gets pretty cold up there. It's serious business. The Way, welcome. I was looking for your channel, The Way. Is it just, literally spelled the way that you're coming in here on the live stream? Because I could not find your YouTube channel. You said you have a YouTube channel, a Christian gang stalking YouTube channel. Is that correct? Because I wanted to check it out. Definitely. It's on Facebook. Okay. Well, if you could, for the rest of us, put a link in the comments. I won't take it down. And that way we can find you. Pamela Barone. Hello, everyone. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I would appreciate it. I want to check it out. It always interests me to find other people with similar beliefs who experience harassment. We're a very small minority of people in the world, and of course, it wouldn't work any other way because you start doing this to too many people, the infrastructure of the world to just break right down, wouldn't it? It'd be over. Not only wouldn't it work, for obfuscating the activity, it wouldn't be a very functional society if everybody had to deal with the stuff we deal with. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you, Pamela. Yeah. Well, I gotta go. I gotta go in and find out what's happening with the half-inch triangular, the Illuminati kidney stone. I'm just kidding. The New World Order, oxalate stone. I'm just kidding on that. But yeah, hopefully, for all I know, it's passed out of my system. And when I go get the x ray, it'll be gone. God, please, yeah, put as many prayers in as you guys want on that one. I do not want to go in for surgery again, but it looks like I'm probably going to have to. But I'm feeling a little bit better. Yeah, thanks for asking. I appreciate that. Mr. Beach Walker, the way, what do you search to find? Oh, wait, what do you so? Well, he's going to put the link in there. So, yeah, as much information as possible on that one. That sounds like a pretty good deal. Sound like good people, Christian targeted individuals. Can't beat that. Can't beat that. Okay. All right. Well, we've discussed the menagerie. We've talked about some of the strange things. We've talked about that criteria for that unwritten contract, that method of condemnation that is used to involve people in these little wars. And of course, target individuals are provoked in a lot of different ways to the point where, you don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And we're all human beings. We can be affected. We could be influenced. God help us. You know, thank you, Jesus, that we're still alive and free moral agents as much as we are, literally. But it's very unpredictable to deal with these things, and the emotional manipulation is a factor when it comes to gang stalking. And I've talked about all those things. You get into the methodologies of invading someone's life and manipulating and controlling them and gaslighting them and reprogramming them and just tearing them down into a place where they can have that split, or you can just manipulate them or control them or use them like a bag of meat on a barbecue. you know and a lot of times that's what targets feel like. They're stuck to the dartboard. And there is that reality of using the lateral comparison of the targeted individual, probably to scare whistleblowers or even to coerce people to conformity. I've talked about that. Okay. Well, and getting stuck on some of those stranger motives, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of speculation involved, but I've seen that. And when you're looking at that chain reaction, when you're looking at the need to the motive to the action, with the cause and effect to the phenomena that surrounds the gang stalkers, you can see something's going on, right? Normal people don't do that kind of stuff, right? Depending on what you consider normal. And they're obviously doing it for a reason. They're venting, they're getting off on it, Are they all psychic vampires? I don't know. I think some of them are. And I do believe that. And when you get into the occult, when you get into some of these things that involve witchcraft or whatever, I'm not saying that I don't know that they're literally, feeding off you. They could be, but it does seem that they're getting some type of reward, possibly, spiritually, or some type of stimuli that is generated from the spiritual dimension to get them into that place. And I've talked about when you get into witchcraft and you get into the occult, it's a delusion for everybody because we're human beings. Okay. When someone starts casting spells or they get into that type of thing, they don't have spiritual fingers and they are led to believe they have power, but really who's pulling the strings? Well, it's the spirits, right? It's the disembodied entities, right? You're dealing with principalities, you're dealing with demons, and they're the ones that have that kind of power, and they can affect people in a way where they might feel like they're getting a boost, right? Or they may experience a time like I talked about with those contracts where it seems like some people have sold their souls for fame and fortune. That they might, it's like the gang stalkers. They don't experience harassment. Well, I don't have to worry about that. Well, good for you. You know, it's not going to work out for you later, but whatever. Um, and it's not that I'm bitter about that. I'm just, it is what it is. I don't need that. If everything works out for you, great, wonderful. But I'm going to look at it that way. I wouldn't take my chances with it. But they're getting something out of it. Or it's similar to when you get into a false religion and you have people that they appear happy, they appear very peaceful, even orgasmic. Sometimes when you get into some of the occults where you get into the Kundalini awakening or other things that happen to people, and they're getting something out of it. Obviously, there's going to be a price that comes along with that. But the point is it is something that is being activated from the spiritual dimension. It's not something that is what it is played out to be, or what it is, what people are led to believe about witchcraft, the occult. That's more of a little game that is being played. And I've talked about how targeted individuals, they might all of a sudden feel uneasy or anxious. Those little incremental forms of orchestration that get the targeted individual in a place where they can be manipulated, right? And they can be moved around. Their mood can be affected, right? And they come to propositions according to that type of stimuli, right? And then, of course, you get into propositional tyranny, and that's how they get people to believe things, whether you're dealing with a false religion or whatever. Well, the burning of the bosom for the Mormons, or the Kundalini awakening, or whatever. And it's real stimuli, it's real emotions, it's real sensations, but they're being generated, and technically they're illegitimate because they're just being used for manipulation, right? So when you're dealing with the occult, or when you're dealing with someone who thinks they're feeding on you, there's probably just things like that. And of course, I'm speculating, but the delusion is they have power, right? Or they are the ones that are the warlocks or the witches, and they're being manipulated, right? It's an illusion. They're like little kids, playing King of the Castle or something, and they're wearing all these hats. They're role playing, and there's a lot of people that get into that stuff. They're unhappy with their lives, so they don't want to be who they are. They want to be something special. They want to be something powerful. They don't want to be oppressed. They're trying to escape. They're trying to enter into a real life fantasy, and for them, that's their way out of the mundane life or whatever. And I've talked about that before. People get introduced to that stuff, maybe even in childhood, and the obfuscated reality that we're dealing with is that stuff is real. Okay, when kids get into Harry Potter, or they're watching The Lord of the Rings or whatever, and they think it's all just fantasy. Well, it is, but it's not. Okay, there are things that have been obfuscated. There is an invisible reality around us, and it involves disembodied spirits. It involves things like witchcraft. It involves secret societies. It involves all the things that targeted individuals are dealing with. I want to get back into the comments real quick. Uh, Sean Abrams, yeah, I was talking about after the live stream is over. And I put it in the comments of the video, and that way the link will be up there for everybody. Ernie says all demons hate us. Well, yeah, of course they do. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah, just put the link up there after we're done with the video. That's what I was talking about. I should have specified. I thought I said that. I thought I was clear on that. After the video posts, assuming that I'm gonna keep it up there. Sometimes I take them down. I'll keep it up there, or put it in any other video that's up there. You can put it up on the Demonic Hive if you want, wherever. Just get it up there where you can find it. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Just Me Heidi says they feed into the way of the wickedness. Their reward comes in different forms depending on their desires. Yeah, yeah. Well, they're gonna get a reward. They- I don't think they're gonna like it. Oh no, they're gonna get that. Okay, just going through the comments here. All right. Yeah. Dungeons and Dragons used to be cultish for some. Yeah, that's interesting. That's old school. I think that was back in the 70s and the 80s that came out. I could be wrong. Maybe it was before. That's what I remember anyway. I haven't done a big study on Dungeons and Dragons. We used to play that when we were kids, and a lot of kids would get into that, and of course that involved all those elements of the fantasy world that I referenced, where you get into role playing, and of course there's witchcraft and spells and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was part of the satanic panic. A lot of people, were talking about, going way too far with it. And I think a lot of people did, to the point where you had groups of people that would dress up, and, you had your dungeon masters and everything. And they just, be doing all kinds of drugs and getting together and, playing Dungeons and Dragons. And of course, anytime you're going to be doing all that stuff, and going too far into the realm of fantasy, and getting into things that involve the elements of witchcraft, you're going to have the demonic being involved in that. But it did moved up into a lot of different areas. So that was part of that satanic panic. I think maybe I'm conflating it with something that's non-related, but you have a lot of those things. And then of course you got to deal with disinformation. And there was a lot of the psychiatric community became involved in that, to where different forms of therapy became popular. I think it was around the 80s, where you had a lot of regression therapy that was, because you get little fads in the psychiatric community. A lot of times electric shock therapy will come and go. I've noticed that since the 90s. it came back for a little while, then it went away, and then it came back, and it went away. But regression therapy was used by a lot of those uh, people that interviewed victims or supposed victims of satanic ritual abuse. And come to find out, a lot of the things involved in that type of regression therapy were nothing more than implanted memories. Okay. Some of it was, I guess, legitimate, but I know some of it was not. In fact, I experienced, there was a lady that worked up at the academy that I went to, and she did that regression therapy. And you had a girls' dorm, and I've referenced the exorcism that took place up there. That was pretty creepy. But there was another gal that freaked out at one of our community meetings. We used to have these big, huge group therapy meetings. We had group therapy constantly, but we would get together in these meetings, and it would last sometimes from, well, it was usually after dinner till sometimes 4 in the morning. So you're talking about 7 p.m. to like 4 a.m. Huge community group meetings where people get put in the hot seat. All kinds of things would happen. 300 people strong. You know, you've never seen group therapy until you've been to something like that. But one, we would have the families come in and visit, and a lot of times it was kind of strange to see, people, they would take advantage of it. Their parents would come and visit, and then of course they would get attacked by the therapists, and they would do role playing, and it could be intense. But this girl was doing the regression therapy, and she freaks out and accused her grandpa of molesting her in front of 300 people. Man, you son of a! And he's just standing there. He's like, "What the hell are you guys talking about, man?" And the therapist comes out and says, "Well, we did regression therapy, and we found out that a lot of the trauma and all these problems and depression and everything that this girl's been having is because you used to molest her when she was a kid." And he's like, "I did not." And this whole thing ended up to where it was all just baloney. This you just see the look on this guy's face. So accused in front of 300 people, and she's screaming at him. And but it was all just, it was all just fabricated. But yeah, yeah, the satanic panic. Okay. Yeah, that was a fun little story. Yeah, it was wild, man. You should have seen. She was screaming. Her face was red. She was crying and calling him all these names, and everybody was just looking at him like he was a bastard, and he didn't do anything. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I saw some pretty weird things at the academy. I'll tell you what, man. Uh, okay. Well, let's see here. So, whoops. Let me go back to this comment here. Okay. Well, I'm just going to let you guys have that dialogue. Everybody's on their spiritual journey, and they're going to get where they're going eventually. So let's see here. Yeah. Well, we've already talked about some of that weird stuff, and of course, it's involved, and everything targets deal with are strange. You deal with a lot of strange phenomena. Like I said, not everybody deals with that. Some people are in more of a logical scenario where they're dealing with community harassment. They might be dealing with the authorities, uh, workplace harassment. It might be more plausible for them to imagine they're part of a government program, which they could be. It's nothing wrong with that. But for the people out there that are really getting driven nuts, they're going to be dealing with the wild stuff. They're going to be dealing with things that are demonic, that involve different types of manipulation that are similar to a lot of what people deal with in electronic harassment. And it goes into all those foundations and aspects we talked about. Targets are used in that menagerie to obfuscate the spiritual reality, for coercion, to silence whistleblowers, to promote agendas, for philosophical delusions and tyranny and ideologies, for everything. And you get into all kinds of manipulation, and you're part of that. Those are just some of the reasons that people are targeted. Okay. Or, how far we're going to go into this Agenda 2030 or not, you just never know. I know this year is going to be very intense, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen. So let's see here. We're going to open up the questions now and see what you guys come out with. I probably walked past some of you guys' comments, and so I'm just gonna start reading the comments now. Anybody have anything? Doesn't matter what it is. Okay. Do you remember the targeted individual that went by Nappy on YouTube? Yeah, I remember that. I didn't actually. Somebody else is the one that brought him up, and evidently he's gone now or something. And I think from what I remember, and that would have been probably about a year ago, that because a lot of people were following that guy, and I never did. So I could be, talking some smack here, and I apologize. But I think something happened to where he was maybe incarcerated for a while or something. Is he still out there? Yeah, I heard that he went to jail. I don't know. But I've talked about that before, that there is a progression that targets go through. Okay. And it's very dangerous for new targeted individuals to be unaware of this methodology, the meat grinder that you are subjected to, because it is designed for that purpose. Okay. First, targets get out there, and they're awakened to what's happening to them. They are awakened to some of the elements that are involved in gang stalking. We talked about a lot of them. Usually the target has a tendency to hyper focus on one area or the other, to become distracted, to give in to some disinformation. Of course, the agitation and the atmosphere around the target is part of that manipulation and toxic soup that they're involved in for manipulation purposes, not only to discredit them, but to push them into being aggressive and hostile, to put them in a place where they could be incarcerated or worse. Okay, and it usually follows that typical progression. A lot of people that are target individuals, we're probably never going to know who they are, and it usually follows that. And I see that people are aware, they get a channel, they become frustrated, they start attacking maybe even other targeted individuals. The paranoia increases to the point where people start reading into things. They become hostile. The sense of injustice builds up to an unacceptable level. They give into that solution based thinking, in the sense that they've got to figure out a way to solve it. There's no way out. They become hopeless. They become reckless, and then they disappear. And I don't know if that's what happened to Nappy or not. Like I said, I wasn't really somebody who was following him, but I had a lot of people bring him up, and I had somebody talking about that. And it's evidently, you have that type of commonality between a lot of different targets out there who used to have channels and ended up becoming incarcerated or become aggressive to the point where they lost their, ability to be free moral agents of society, whether temporary or permanent. And that's unfortunate. Sean Abrams says Illuminati, another channel, killed a guy 6 months ago and is incarcerated. And I didn't even know about that. I'll have to check that one out. Wow. Deep fake Rob, huh? Okay, I'll have to check that one out. Thanks for the heads up on that one. Yeah, this can happen. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. I don't really have any firsthand information, but it's just something that happens. A lot of the people out there that we'll go back 3 or 4 years when I first started doing this. They're not out there anymore. At least I don't think they are. And a lot of them have followed into that. And I've watched this happen to people. Not only that, I've experienced it myself. I've gone through all these stages, and it just depends on how much fear is mixed in with the target scenario. And sometimes that can be a blessing. I know it's used to manipulate the target and to traumatize them, but sometimes it comes with a blessing that at least you keep your head on your shoulders and you shut up and you don't become aggressive because you're surrounded, man, and you just try to survive and move forward without getting into that scenario where you're going to freak out and hurt yourself or somebody else. Unfortunately, that's part of the method of gang stalking, though. That's part of that chain reaction. HD says all of life is a stage. You guys got any more questions? Unless I missed one here, I'm gonna go back and look. Wow, Sean Abrams, you got a lot of information on these people. That's interesting. You must do your homework. I appreciate the heads up, though. Waiting for a question. Yeah, I know who you are. Like I said, you must do your homework on these targets. I didn't know about all that stuff. GoPro, Dr. Defacto, what do you think of the Archons and what they have to do with Gangstalk? The Archons? Well, that goes into a lot of different areas, but that's really when you get into the secret societies, they hold to a lot of that, depending on which area you're going to get into, whether you're going to get into the seven archons or whether you're going to deal with the mytho, because when you're dealing with the mythos that is involved in deceiving the elite, you are dealing with a type of polytheism. Okay. So rather than there just being one God, right? And he created all the other Elohim or the disembodied spirits or the principalities and powers. And then of course you have the bastard spirits or the hybrids when you go back to the Genesis 6 account, which for me that's the biblical and the most consistent canonical material that you can come away from that with, which you have, of course, what happened in the Garden of Eden, moving up to uh, the dispensation of control and power, not dispensationalism, being handed over to the principalities and powers. You have the rebellion of mankind, in other words. You have the involvement of the spiritual dimension. You get into the Deuteronomy 32:8 view, which references the Tower of Babel. And then you begin to trek through time when you're dealing with the heads of the dragon or the manifestations of the contingency on the planet, which start out with Egypt. Like I said, when you get into the secret societies, you go all the way back there. That's the all seeing eye, which in witchcraft represents the eye of Satan, and so on and so forth. It's all connected. Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, up to the modern day, which is the Ottoman Empire, which is the seventh head, destroyed in 1923 with a deadly wound, resurrected now with Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the radical type of Muslim caliphate over there, which would be the eighth coming out of the seventh, which would represent the contingency in the archons. You don't have that. You have multiple gods, multiple options. Satan is just nothing more than Jesus' brother, and you have a whole different, the set of ways of interpreting this stuff to where these archons, and I haven't looked into it a whole lot, are involved in a different way than, like I said, uh, when you break out of the polytheistic stuff. So you get into the demiurge, which would try to make God out to be the bad guy, and so on and so forth. And you have a lot of different ways of interpreting the things out there. But if you want to look into the spiritual dimension, I would recommend you look into Dr. Michael Heiser. You look into you know the Dead Sea Scrolls. You look into biblical information, or if you want to go into some of the more conspiratorial stuff, you could look into Gary Wayne or other guys like that. I differ a little bit on the eschatology that those guys hold to, but they get into that stuff. They get into all the different things that involve that. I don't hold to that. I'm not into polytheism, and I certainly don't hold to the mythos that the elite do, and the secret societies which get into the bloodlines and everything. And I think some of them anyway, would honor the archons with handing down the information and some of those things that are involved in the hidden knowledge and secret wisdom involved in that mythos. That's how I would answer that question. So, in other words, when you get into the secret societies and the royals, the bloodlines and everything, all that goes back into the hidden knowledge and secret wisdom, and a lot of people believe it came from there, but it doesn't. Okay, so okay, Christianity comes from Gnostic cult, which includes archons. Well, no, I don't think Christianity comes out of a Gnostic cult. Gnostic would be more of a philosophical injection uh, that would be separate from the interpretation of the Dead Sea Scrolls or the canonical material. Gnosticism is more of an injection of philosophy that goes in to where you mix the two together, like perverted forms of Christianity mixed in Rosicrucianism, for example. That would be a Gnostic form of perverted Christianity, right? Where you're mixing those things together. I would definitely disagree. I don't think Christianity is a Gnostic cult. It would be the odd, but some of them have become that. In fact, some of the doctrines out there are nothing more than Gnosticism because they're isolated scripture taken out of context, and they form a type of tyranny in the sense that people are holding to a system of presuppositions or a systematic theology rather than interpreting the Bible for what it is. And then of course they have to apply a Hegelian dialectic, which is really obvious when you look at it, but it's always appeals into the area of philosophy away from what the Word of God says. For example, when you get into Calvinism, they will say, well, God just predestined everybody and he's just electing people. And the Bible doesn't say that at all. And when you show them what it says, they'll say, well, yeah, but, and then they'll throw a straw man argument out there or a philosophical conundrum that has nothing to do with what the Bible says. And that's so I think there's a lot of things that have become that way, but it's not like that. Okay. Dublin Fitzpatrick says, Dr. Defacto, what do you think about Orthodox Christianity? I'm assuming you're talking about Eastern Orthodox. Is that what you're talking about, Dublin? The Eastern Orthodox Church? Is that what you're talking about? The split off the Catholic Church? Well, I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. Well, let's see here. Yes. Okay. Yeah, well, the Eastern Orthodox split off of Catholicism, and really, when you get into a lot of these the things that happened after the Reformation, You find a lot of people competing with the Catholic Church, which is the largest church aside from the Muslims on the planet. Okay. They're approaching around 1.4 billion people. The Eastern Orthodox are a lot smaller and primarily are usually you're going to find the largest populations of them up in Russia, and they don't hold to the same beliefs as the Catholics do concerning the purgatory. Uh, they do not hold to the veneration of Mary. She plays a different role, and I think transubstantiation is also different. I don't think they believe that it literally turns into the flesh or the blood. And there's other doctrines that I don't. They all hold to different things that are involved in the Apocrypha. But as far as the Eastern Orthodox Church, they don't they don't consider it canonical. They just consider it of interest and of a benefit. So it's not canonical material. They also venerate people as far as well, I don't know about venerate. They have saints. In other words, they have a type of I don't know a categorization of people they would hold up in high regard at the very least. And some of the things involved in becoming a monk or whatever that are involved in the Eastern Orthodox Church are similar to Catholicism in the sense that if you're going to become someone like that and literally live in the church, I think you have to be celibate. But I don't think it's a vow of celibacy. So there's some similarities, but they're quite a bit different. And a lot of people would consider them. A lot of people that are Eastern Orthodox consider that to be the legitimate original church when you get back into the whole thing, which is kind of a play on words anyway. So the Catholics will say that Peter was the first pope when they use the scriptures that upon this rock I'll build my church, which is a play on words because that has to do with Mount Hermon, which was actually the area of Bashan, which is where the Mount of Transfiguration was. And it was also where the people in that day considered the gates of hell. And so the big rock, Mount Hermon, upon this rock, I will build my church. That's where they were when Jesus asked Peter who he was, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. In other words, Jesus was picking a fight. And the infiltration of the gospel came after his crucifixion. But he was the promise from the Garden of Eden, the seed of the woman to crush the head of the serpent, the crushing one, the Messiah. And when he showed up, he wasn't messing around. Even when you send out, or when you look at when he sent out the 70 disciples apart from the 12 apostles, that represented the table of nations. A lot of people don't know why he did that. Declare the kingdom of God is here. Well, he's taken back the nations. And when you get into Psalm 82, he is going to inherit the nations. A lot of people don't understand why he did that or why the demoniac met him when he crossed the Sea of Galilee. Okay, they ran up to him and said, what do you want with us? Let us go into the swine. Do not send us into the deep or the abyss, because those spirits are allowed to run around until the time of the end. Okay. And they're the disembodied spirits of the half breeds that were killed during the flood. Okay. And so they didn't know what he was going to do, but they know that after that time is over, they're going to have to go into the abyss or to Taurus. So when you get into, looking at Peter as the first pope or interpreting the scriptures or whatever, you're going to get a lot of different things. The Eastern Orthodox is a lot different than Catholics, but even the Lutheran Church competes a little. They have absolution. It's different. They hold this different, but you can see the similarities. I think Bora Bora had a question. I'm going to go back here and find out. Well, I'm sorry if I'm skipping you guys. Bora Bora, hey Doc, were you aware that Gorilla Boy posted a video? No, I don't care what he's doing. I don't I don't follow up. any of that stuff. I don't even, in fact, don't even ever bring it up again, man. I'm sorry. They don't. Yeah, I don't even go there. I don't even play that game. Sorry about that. I didn't see the question about the target list. Sorry about that. I'm looking for it. Oh, okay. Steve Wells. Do you think when the watch list is exposed, this will stop? No, absolutely not. No. No. This is way bigger than that, man. And I that's one of the main emphasis that I try to tell. Well, it depends on what you're dealing with. If you're one of those people that are dealing with something that is involved in being, investigated, surveillance, or something like that by the government, and they're just, you're part of that reciprocal uh, mechanism that is involved in a type of agenda, and you're not dealing with higher forms of harassment, it might stop for you, if something happens there. But the fact that the Patriot Act is a blanket immunity. Not only that, look at where we're headed, man. Look at all the chaos around everything that's going on. It's there's only more excuses to keep people in that place where they're scared, and the all the citizens around you have become a possible terrorist. So we're not really moving in that direction. But if you're a target that's experiencing higher forms of harassment, it's absolutely not going to stop, because it's not dependent upon the government. Even though the government might be involved, it's not exclusively dependent upon that. And I've talked about that with targets. If you're somebody who's dealing with higher forms of harassment, the enemy, the spiritual dimension, has a plan for your life, and they are correlating all these things together. You've been set up, man. That's why it doesn't seem like you can get away from any of this stuff. It's like hindsight for them. Okay. They have a different perspective than you. That's when you get into astrology or forecasting and all those things. They've got a lot of things planned out. The hope that I give people is that, God in his sovereignty, he's really the only one that can stop this or turn it into something good, which is usually what happens. People are always looking for a miraculous deliverance. People, well, I don't know. I prayed to God, but nothing happened. What did you want to happen? Don't believe a lot of the hokey stuff out there where people talk about instant deliverances for everything. God normally does not work that way. He wants you to walk with him and learn, and grow. And when people have miraculous deliverances, that does not happen. There is a process, okay? And the whole reason we've been subjected to futility or the pride of life, or the negative effects of living our own way, is for us to learn that it's not going to work. And walking with him, and drawing near to God and learning from him and understanding who he is, the invisible God, and seeing his attributes from the things he's made, the word that he has given us, and the way that he helps clean up your life and preserve you and all those other things is foundational in your experience on this planet. That's your hope. Okay. But sometimes he does that. Sometimes people get healed. Sometimes people experience miraculous deliverance from drugs. And they don't have to go through withdrawal. Okay, there's all kinds of things you can hope for, but looking at the government watch list thing, I think it's bigger than that. Okay, all right. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, let's see what's up. Okay, am I missing any questions, guys? I'm trying to scan through this stuff. All right. Wow, the way says wouldn't let my comments through. That's weird. That is weird. It wasn't me. It had nothing to do with me. Ernie says Calvinism versus Martin Luther. Well, you have a type of commonality there that involves, in my opinion, a type of cognitive dissonant monergism. What do I mean by that? that you have an order of salutis. You have the order of salvation way messed up, and it goes right into Gnostic philosophy. So for the Lutheran or the Calvinist, a person is dead and separated from God in the sense that they cannot believe or recognize their need from God and have to experience regeneration before they can believe, which means that they have to be regenerated. And before that, they have to be elected. And then they get to the place where they can believe. And then, it's just a mystery. So the order of salvation is off, rather than the scriptures, which are very clear and say that it pleased God to save them that which believe or choose life. God is going to, Christ is going to lift himself up and draw all men to himself, and so on and so forth. And that you have a responsibility to believe the gospel and see your need. But the total depravity in Calvinism, or that need for prevenient grace from the Lutherans, means that you have to be regenerated before you can believe, which comes out of a unilateral choice or mystery of God simply electing certain individuals. It's not possible, because it throws off the order of salutis, or it throws off the order of salvation. It cannot be. And of course, then you have to appeal to mystery and philosophy, and then you have to use a Hegelian dialectic for scriptures like God wants everyone to come to the knowledge of the truth, or God desires all to come to repentance. But if that's true, then the other cannot be true, you see, because if God's the one that's choosing people when he really wants to choose everybody, then why doesn't he? Well, it's a mystery. The order of salutis is thrown off. So yeah, the Lutheran, it's cognitive dissonant monergism. So, and in the sense that we're giving God all the glory for salvation, but they're also inadvertently making him responsible for all the people that go to hell. Makes absolutely no sense at all. Cognitive dissonance on every level. Okay, moving on along here. All right, it's not that I don't like the Lutherans. I like them, but it's frustrating. How do you square that circle? You don't. Okay, that's Steve Wells. Then what can I do? I'm not sure where that's coming from. What are you talking about, Steve? No, I don't hate Catholics. They have some real beautiful music. They just got some serious issues with their doctrine, man, but they're not Calvinists. Yeah, you gotta love the Calvinists. I'm trying to figure out what you're asking me, Steve. What's going on? Okay. Okay, well, I thought maybe you were talking to somebody else. I apologize. Okay. Okay, the way says you know your stuff, my friend. I assume that you have studied systematic theology. Oh, I've studied all that stuff. I've studied Calvinism, compatibilism, all forms of determinism. The problem that people get into when they start nitpicking on that stuff, where they get into the cognitive dissonant forms of holding to 1-point Calvinism or 2-point or 3-point Calvinism, is that they are not realizing that total depravity is the foundation of all of those beliefs. And if a person is dead in the sense of inability to choose or to recognize their need for God, then you have to appeal to that Hegelian dialectic. And if people are dead in the sense of total inability, then everything is Calvinism. Everything falls into covenant theology. Everything involves election or unilateral election or an appeal to mystery. Because if people cannot believe, or they have no capacity to do that, then you eliminated human responsibility, unless, of course, you're just going to be nuts. And you've eliminated everything that's in the Bible and applied it to the systematic theology, which completely is the opposite from what the scriptures say in context. So if God's will is that all come to the knowledge of the truth and all believe, and he's not willing that any should perish, but all come to eternal life, then why is it that that's not in his subjective will, because in the Hegelian dialectic of the determinist, you will have to appeal to a subjective will and a perfect will, or you'll just have to say that it's not in the scriptures at all, right? So there's only two approaches. You either apply the Hegelian dialectic and say it's both mysteriously in a quantum reality, or you just say it's not there and the scriptures are only communicating all kinds of people or something like that. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I've studied all that stuff. Yeah. Well, Calvin's theology, a lot of people will label him, the people that are in Calvinism and compatibilism now are even more intense than Calvin. They hold to beliefs like the Westminster London Baptist Confession, or the 1689 or whatever it is, where you have people being predestined. In Article 3, God ordaining all things and bringing everything about by secondary causes, or ordaining both men and angels to heaven or hell in Articles 4 and 5 of the London Baptist Westminster Confession, which Calvin wouldn't even, I don't even, he would appeal to some of that, but not all of it. Or when you get into, semi-Pelagianism, or when you get into that whole thing and the Augustinian debate, which is really where all this came from. It wasn't Calvin, it was Augustine. Augustine was an influential part of the Gnosticism that Calvinism eventually held to, and he was a Manichaean. So it's always a straw man argument that goes into philosophy or baptismal regeneration or something like that, where you have to get into some mysterious election process. Yeah, well, the way he says he likes R.C. Sproul's work. Well, yeah, there's a huge problem with Sproul, and that would be, his form of sovereignty, because it's a classic straw man argument that you get involved in, and that involves that if God is not in control of everything and there's no rogue molecule that's out of his control, then he's not sovereign. If God is not ordaining everything, if his fingers aren't involved in everything, then he's not sovereign. You'll deal with stuff like that, and he's the one famous for that quote. In fact, you'll deal with that. So, what's the straw man argument? God is either in control or he isn't in control. So, what have you done? You've eliminated responsibility and free moral agency, and forgot the fact that God is sovereign in the sense that he's created all the parameters that people make their free choices in the sense that he can intervene whenever he wants. Doesn't mean he has to make all the decisions, though, does it? Yeah, I don't. I would recommend you stay away from that. Okay, well, anyway, we're getting off into these little rabbit trails. So I don't mind all that. Just me, Heidi says, I follow religion. I follow the Bible. That's good, because when you get into all the isms, you're getting into philosophy. You've deviated from the scripture. Keeping it simple is good. Another problem you might run into the way is that a lot of people will take offense to calling that reformed theology, even though most people know exactly what you're talking about. And some of the people that you ask, are you reformed? They'll say, yes, I'm reformed. It doesn't mean that they believe in Calvinism. That just means they split off from the Catholic Church. you got you. It's some people consider that fighting words, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and they'll call it reformed theology too. But when you start critiquing a Calvinist and you start getting into word games with them, and they realize they can't draw you out into philosophy or play with your head, then they'll start labeling you, or they'll start playing games with words. And you just, if nothing else, they'll just run from you. Okay. Yeah, I'm a theology geek. Nobody has any idea what we're talking about here. Okay, I'm get back in here and see what's going on. Okay. All right. All right. Well, anybody have any other questions? I probably missed something. Apologize if I didn't get your question. Jake Nord says he likes the theology talk. Well, that's okay. Right on. I know it's flying above everybody else's head because I wouldn't have understood any of it, but I spend yeah, a ridiculous amount of time looking into this stuff. But really it does play into gang stalking in a lot of ways because people will get into this whole thing to where you're subjected to something and why are you subjected to it? And of course, the whole idea will come up as God is he's the one doing this to you, or why is he allowing this, and so on and so forth. So if you don't understand, if you don't have the right salient landscape and understand that both men and angels are making free will, free moral agent choices within the parameters of God's sovereign creation, which he can intervene in whenever he wants. And of course, this whole thing, if it's not genuine in that sense, it's not real. When you get into forms of determinism, what happens? People are robots. Everything is pre-programmed and somehow it mysteriously makes sense and is significant. But of course, that's not possible. All right, it's ridiculous. It's it's like I said before. It's cognitive dissonance. Either it makes sense or it doesn't. And if something doesn't make sense, then it's wrong. You know, it's really weird when you get into that. So when targets are dealing with this stuff, yeah, God's allowing it, and there's a way that things can work out for good, and there's a way things can work out for the bad. And targeted individuals are always at that crossroads. And just because you're dealing with an insane scenario that seems like there's no possible way it could be redeemed, that's not true because there's always those possibilities involved in every scenario, even gang stalking. Okay, you can go one way or you can go the other way, and God could work it out for good. He can work it out for the other thing too. There's the choice and the ability for people to go one way or the other. Okay, and there's only two options: heaven or hell. The way says Dr. Defacto, I don't like to label myself any denomination, but if I had to say I'm the closest, it's probably evangelical. Yeah, well, yeah, that's good that you don't want to label yourself because there's always a problem with that. You're kind of limiting yourself every time you label yourself. There's nothing wrong with an organized system of beliefs. A lot of people like that. Some people need that structure. You know, not everybody gets into looking into this stuff as intensely as some of you. They're not all into that theology stuff. But what happens when you map yourself to a systematic theology or a creedal statement of faith? You become a zombie, right? You become a zombie. That's when you're dealing with a Calvinist or somebody like that. Yeah, you're looking into the eyes of a zombie. It's like you're dealing with a type of avatar that has a pre-programmed answer for every little thing you say that appeals to a philosophical conundrum, right? Well, if God's not in control of everything, he's in control of nothing. It's like dealing with a computer, you know. And when you hold to a creedal statement of faith, that's what happens. This is what we believe, and this is why we believe it. You know, and is that really the way it is? Let's take a look at that. And a lot of times it'll deviate from what the Bible says. That's how that's how it all happens. Creedal statements of faith. My nail says Romans 8:28. That's interesting. That's a good scripture. And a lot of people get confused on that and they mix it in with Ephesians 1:4-5. You were chosen in Christ uh, and predestined to the adoption of children. Okay. And that's a kind of a condensed form of that. Christ was in existence before the foundations of the world, the second person of the Trinity, the means that God used to reconcile the world to himself, the lamb slain before the foundations of the world. And that's in First Peter, right? And of course, you're in Christ by faith, and now you're predestined to the adoption of children or the adoption of sons. Now, what do most people see when they look at that? You were predestined to be adopted as a child of God. But of course, that's not what it says, because that word adoption is taken into the modern day understanding of adoption. It's like when someone is adopted as a child, you're adopted into our family. Now you're one of us. That's not has nothing to do with what it's saying. And the scripture interprets itself in Romans 8:23. In Romans 8:15, it says you've received the spirit of adoption. In Romans 8:23, it says you are waiting for the adoption. Well, if that was true in Ephesians 1, you wouldn't be waiting for that, because you would have been a child of God, and the whole communication was that you were predestined to be adopted as a child. But that's not what it means, because in Romans 8:23, it says that we are waiting for the adoption, which is the redemption of the body. So Christ was chosen as a means of reconciliation. You are in him by faith, and now you are predestined to glorification, right? Romans 8:23, Romans 8:28-30. Those he has called, he has predestined, so on and so forth. A lot of Calvinists will call that the golden chain of redemption. But that word foreknew or foreknow is the Greek word prognosko. It's the same word that is used in Romans 11:2. God has not cast off those which he foreknew, right? Which gets into a lot of things that have to do with the Jewish people, that God has not cast off the people which he intimately knew before. Okay, so there's different ways of understanding the word prognosko: to know before, to intimately know in the past or of old. And obviously in Romans 11:2, it's talking about the Jewish people. When you get into the prophecies of Jeremiah, that they have a future and a hope. Why? Because God is going to regather them back together. And after the fullness of the nations come in, and the veil of Moses is taken off, and the judicial hardening is taken away, and they see the one whom they pierced, all Israel is going to be saved. And that's why Paul says, don't be arrogant against the natural branches or the Jews that were cut off for unbelief, because they can be grafted back in if they believe, right? What does that have to do with Romans 8:28? Because there's a succession in the book of Romans. And if you isolate Romans 8:28, you're not going to understand what it means. In Romans chapter 1, Abraham believed, and he was justified by what he believed. He believed God, and he was justified, and righteousness was accounted to him. Okay, so when you start out in the book of Romans, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God of all those who believe, first for the Jew, then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, righteousness from God is revealed from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Abraham was justified by faith. Then you move into Romans chapter 2. If you preach the law, do you keep the law? Obviously, you can't keep the law. The law is of no value. You move into Romans chapter 3. All throats are open graves. All tongues practice deceit. You cannot be justified by the law, which goes into Ephesians, where you're not justified by works, but by faith, so that no one should boast. What are the works? Works of the law. It's not talking about whether you're good or bad. The works are works of the law. You can't be circumcised. You can't follow the dietary laws and be justified. The law is of no value. Circumcision is of no value if you're going to be justified by Christ. And of course, you move on along your relationship to the law and so on and so forth. You get up to Romans chapter 7, and then you're dealing with a type of forensic separation of the believer which is a type of spiritual circumcision in the sense that you are different from your flesh. And Paul says, I want to do the right thing, but the things I want to do, I cannot do. And the things that I don't want to do, I keep doing them. And when I sin, I don't consider it me that is doing it, but the sin that is living in me. What's he illustrating? He is illustrating the fact that there is a separation and that you are in Christ by faith, seated in the heavenly places in Jesus, and that's separate from the flesh, and that now that you are dead to the law, right? You're not justified by the law, and so on and so forth, and you are in Christ, and your justification is in that, and that sin, that work that is in your members is foreign to you. So when people are being tempted or things happen, you have to recognize it as alien, right? Because why? Because you're dead to sin now, because you're forensically separated. You move into Romans chapter 8, and you are dealing with the encouragement of the persecuted Roman church, right? The Grecian church of Grecian Jews and Gentiles in Rome. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. God's going to work all things out for your benefit. Not height nor depth can separate you from the love of God. And then, of course, he moves into Romans 8:28, for those God has foreknew. Who's that? Those are people that he has talked about all the way through, that he has brought them through, because when he gets into Romans chapter 9, he has to explain that God's word has not failed. Okay, why? Well, because the Jews didn't receive it by faith. Okay, and when you talk about the noble vessels or the common purposes in Romans chapter 9, you are talking about the noble task of bringing forth the Messiah through the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Ben Joseph and Ben David. Okay, Ishmael, his lineage was not chosen. Esau, his lineage was not chosen. There were a lot of people that were not chosen for that noble task. It doesn't mean they're not saved. It doesn't mean they can't be saved. It just means that noble task, that purpose of God's election to bring forth the Christ through the lineage of Abraham after the Tower of Babel, was not part of that. And it is not as though God's word has failed, because some of the Jews who tried to get it by works of the law did not attain it because they didn't obtain it by faith. And there's the judicial hardening that he refers to when he talks about the potter and the clay, which has to do with the specific prophecies of Jeremiah the prophet, right? Go down to the potter's house. So the vessel was disobedient willingly, right? And God reformed it. Okay. And so you have a succession. So when people use Romans 8 for determinism, they're taking it out of context and they don't understand the word prognosko. Or when you get into supersessionism or replacement theology, that's individualistic Augustinian predestination according to foreknowledge. For those God is foreknown, right? That's not talking about people that he knew would be saved and he chose them because he knew that they would choose him. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's important to understand that. I probably lost a few people on that one. Okay. All righty. Well, sorry about that tangent, but sometimes I have a tendency to do that. Okay. Well, guys, I think I'm going to end the live stream now. And who knows, maybe I'll come on and do another one because, it's just one of those things that, like I said, we get together and we interact. It's good to see you guys having a dialogue out there. And it's good that we can all get together and be, civil to one another and have that affirmation as targets. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. I'd like to thank all of you who help support the channel. The link is always in the description. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.